Welcome back to VMDR Live. This is round two of our Q&A session. We had so many great questions and positive feedback by having do the live session that we want to do a second version of that with live Q&A for the additional questions that people have asked. Joining me along with our president and CPO is Jimmy Graham, who's our director of product management for vulnerability management. So let's get started with some high-level questions that really a lot of people asked about. Really, that comes down to Samed. This is really for you. A lot of low-level questions on licensing. What's licensing? What's included? But really, why VMDR first? Why is Qualys doing this now? And then I'll follow up with a few questions on the specific modules within VMDR.
Yeah, so good question. I think, like I mentioned earlier in the talk as well, that the number of devices, the number of vulnerabilities has been significantly increasing over the last couple of years that everybody has to manage. And I think the resources are not enough, and being able to prioritize based on true risk is really becoming something that's important and critical for organizations. And to be able to do this sort of a seamless module that goes from end to end, of course, required a lot of work to be put in. We had to really scale the platform, build a lot of the capabilities in the back end that included patch management. I mean, because, at the end, without the response part, it's still not complete. And so the ability to get our platform to be able to do that kind of a processing at such a high speed, storing that kind of data that I talked earlier. I think that sort of all came together now with, of course, the need of the hour for our customers needing to be able to do the prioritization and the response capabilities much faster. I think that's what the timing of this is coming together from both perspectives together now.
Okay, I think maybe some of the questions people asked, if I had to read into it and paraphrase, some people are really excited about moving into VMDR, and maybe a few others are wondering what's happening to VM. So maybe 3 questions which I'll put together. Will VMDR replace VM and its associated modules? What's the upgrade path from our existing Qualys license to VMDR? And then what subscriptions is this available on? Only enterprise or all of them?
Yeah, great question. I think, as I mentioned, right, the VM module as we have in the product is over the next few months will basically uh, be changed into or upgraded, I should say, to the VMDR experience, where we bring a bunch of the capabilities around dashboarding and widgets and all of that together. And so everybody's VM as they know today is going to be upgraded. And then from there on, those who want the prioritization and the response capabilities can basically upgrade to VMDR. And I think ultimately, I really don't see any reason why people would not want the prioritization and the ability to detect the patches already part of the same solution. So we'll see how customer response is on this one. But I think over a period of time, VMDR is going to become the gold standard for anybody who is doing vulnerability management. And the expectation will be to include prioritization and asset-based prioritization and ability to respond part of that solution. So I think everybody, no matter what subscription, no matter what platform, whether it's Express Enterprise, everybody's accounts will get upgraded to the experience that VMDR experience, and then from there on, everybody can upgrade to VMDR complete solution that brings all of that together.
And you mentioned the threat prioritization, and that really is a big new capability that really brings a lot of platform components together for VMDR. And there's a lot of questions around the threat prioritization. Let me pull a couple out for you to answer, and then we'll go to some of the things that people have asked around patch management. So how are prioritizations derived? So are you integrating MITRE ATT&CK framework, or what type of threat intel that you're doing? And then there's another question on what you presented at the Qualys Security Conference in San Francisco on machine learning and how that it will be added to the prioritization model. So let's take a few minutes talking about those threat prioritization questions, and then we'll move on.
Yeah, the thing about prioritization that some of the vendors have not understood that it is not a prioritization just based on uh, threat intelligence from external feeds also, right? prioritization is also based on how applicable is the threat to the customer specific machine, the specific environment. And so we've done a combination of our own capabilities in terms of our research, our feeds that we are bringing together. In addition to that, we've also taken feeds from some other third-party vendors, and then we are bringing all of those together so that we can provide that directly into the product, and you don't have to pull the data out to do the prioritization somewhere else. And part of that is, of course, we also do leverage some machine learning to look at behavior of vulnerabilities over a period of time, and kind of do some prediction to see which ones are most likely going to be exploitable pretty soon. But again, that is one component of the overall threat correlation capability, and it's not the end all be all of because you have machine learning that solves all the problems, because again, that machine learning is more specific to the to the trend of the CVEs, and then you also still need to bring in the customer's own environment to do true prioritization.
Okay, great. Yes, that definitely makes sense. A lot more questions for you, Sumedh, but let me answer a few myself. I get my own questions this time. And of course, this will be recorded. This will be put online, was my other question from round one. A few questions on the agent, what we call the Qualys Cloud Agent, and a few questions really focused on, is VMDR agent a different agent? Is the Qualys agent a different agent from the Cloud Agent? What operating systems that it runs on? All those are answered together in it's the same agent. So we call it the Qualys Cloud Agent. It's a single agent. It's part of VMDR. If you already have the Qualys Cloud Agent deployed for vulnerability management or even policy compliance or our other applications like file integrity monitoring or IOC or patch management, it's the same agent. The VMDR capabilities you really get is on the platform side with all the platform intelligence. We support back to Windows XP Service Pack 3 all the way up to Windows 10. We do support legacy operating systems that were also asked in the question. Even though that there may be no patches on legacy operating systems, you need to know your assets, you need to know where they are, need to know when they're running, and also what version they have in applications, and that our asset inventory will tell you. And then really one last question for agent, and then we'll move on to patch management, is what's the usage and resource? We developed the Cloud Agent to be very lightweight, where it only collects event telemetry or metadata about the system or about the asset. And the Qualys platform does all of the analysis, indexing, searching, processing, crunching, all those type of things. So you can tune it to be as low as 1 or 2% CPU, 5, 10, 20 mega RAM, very, very lightweight. And that's how you get the scalability of all of these applications. So one new application, of course, is Qualys Patch Management that we released last year, and patch detection and patch deployment are capabilities enabled by VMDR. So Jimmy, a few questions for you. Let's level set this around what can patch detection do, what can VMDR do with devices that the agent can run on, devices that are network devices. Let's set the stage there first, and then we'll move into a few other questions on patch management.
So our patch detection engine is focused around the devices that are supported by the Qualys Cloud Agent. Right now, we're supporting Windows, and Linux support will be arriving shortly, and then shortly followed by Mac. But basically, that engine is a purpose-built engine that really is designed just to detect patches, and then in the back end, we do a correlation between the vulnerabilities and those patches with deep information about the supersedence, so that way we can narrow it down to only the patch that's absolutely needed to fix the various vulnerabilities.
And there's a lot of questions around really maybe technical questions, but if I have to up-level them, it's really a process question around VMDR and patching and patch management. Let me read some of these here. Is there a sandbox option to apply to a lower environment? How can we do that, especially if reboot is required? Does VMDR apply the real patch on the vulnerable device, or is it some type of virtual patch? Can you do scheduled deployments to meet maintenance windows? Can you really talk about the process of patch deployment as part of VMDR?
So we are applying the actual patches. We have a concept within patch management that is called deployment jobs. So most of our customers, when they're deploying patches, they do have a job that's set aside for test systems for testing those patches to make sure that that they're working as appropriate, and then a separate job or multiple jobs if you're doing phased rollouts for the production deployment. So that's typically the best practice, is to have some sort of testing on your patches and to basically divide those up into separate jobs.
Okay, thank you. And we will come back to you. A lot more questions on patch management. For you, Samed, I think there's a lot of individual questions that spread across really the wide range because of what VMDR can do from a wide range. A lot of questions on asset discovery, both on-prem and for container in the cloud, and also the ability to take asset inventory tagging information. You showed that in the demo, but maybe really talk about asset discovery, asset identification, and how some of that logic tagging can come into VMDR.
Yeah, it's the most basic of security, right? Is you cannot secure or look at security for something that you don't know exists on your network. So the asset in discovery and then the deep inventory are the cornerstone for any security program, and that's the reason why that's included as part of VMDR. And we do a lot of work around normalization, so it's not just throwing raw inventory information and customer having to figure out what's a database and what's a client machine versus what's a server machine. So a lot of the processing is done by the platform, because that forms the cornerstone of the overall process. One of the things that a lot of people don't necessarily realize quickly upfront is that just getting asset information is not good enough. You need to be able to organize that information, attribute it to owners and business units and applications. And that's the core part that tagging does after the normalization has been done. The asset tagging can provide ability to have customized rules that can be leveraged to say, if you see ABC on a machine, then this machine belongs to this application or this business unit. And then the platform will automatically keep that updated. And so once those tags are continuously and automatically updated as machines change and new machines come on board, now you have a well organized inventory of all the devices, and then policies can be applied based on that. And so that's that correlation between asset inventory, using tags to tag the specific items in the inventory, and then how you scan or how you deploy the agent or how you patch is all then based on the rules that you can apply based on the specific tags that have been put on those assets.
Well, with all the asset inventory capabilities you showed during your demo for VMDR, there are a couple questions around CMDB. So one, maybe speak to the integrations we can do with CMDB, and I'm actually reading one right here. Is Qualys creating their own CMDB? Is that why there's all this work around asset inventory and discovery?
Good question. No, we're not creating our own CMDB. I think the CMDB has a lot of additional capabilities, functionalities that are used by customers in terms of provisioning, deprovisioning assets, and burn down of assets over a period of time and all of that. But the problem the CMDBs have is that they are never up to date, right? So they are never updated with the latest information. And so from a security perspective, that really causes a challenge, and even IT perspective. And so what Qualys does is that we become the source of truth for the CMDB. So while the CMDB is used for its own specific functions, Qualys will update the CMDB, and it becomes that one source of truth that is keeping all of the assets in the CMDB up to date and organized. So while we don't replace the CMDB, we really become an essential complement to the CMDB to keep the data updated in the CMDB.
And then now moving back to Jimmy around patch management, there's a lot more questions to go through. In fact, I'll read this one because I thought it was very interesting. Thanks for the demo. Worth staying up for here in Scotland. So people on the other side of the pond in Europe stayed up for the live demo, Sumedh. So that's a good point. There was a question about, and this is also a process question, the VMDR really shows you operating system patches that are needed because of vulnerabilities, application patches that are needed. Really a question, Jimmy, for you. What tips do you have to move an organization's culture from a monolithic monthly test, something more frequent and more targeted patching?
So I think it's important to, initially when you get VMDR and the ability to prioritize, is to prioritize those patches that resolve the most critical vulnerabilities, make sure that those are knocked out, but also look at the data that's coming back from patch management, from vulnerability management, and look where it makes sense to establish processes for routine patching. It's important for a lot of these patches to be done on a routine basis, like Patch Tuesday. That includes Microsoft patches, Adobe patches, and others that release on a frequent schedule. We support scheduled deployment jobs. Those can be used to automatically deploy these systems, to deploy these patches to various systems. So it's important really to look at the data and see, which applications, which operating systems make sense to get into a routine patch cycle. And as you move more and more toward routine patching using scheduled jobs, then the amount that you need to basically prioritize and do one-offs will decrease. It'll never go away. You'll still always need to prioritize vulnerabilities and then move to patching. But your general operating system patching and common softwares, those kinds of things can definitely be patched in our.
Okay, and then two questions really on, let's say, custom patching and then the changes with Oracle. So Oracle changed how you can deploy JREs, JDKs. Will non-publicly available patches for legacy Java JRE, JDK be available to the Qualys Patch Management module? And are you looking to do custom patching as part of the Patch Management module?
Yes, so both of those are on our roadmap. Both of those will be released later this year. Oracle did make some changes to how they release the patches, which prevents us from doing direct downloads ourselves. We will be adding features that will allow you to upload patches where we already understand how to deploy Java. We're just not able to distribute the binary. So you'll be able to provide that binary to us. We'll distribute it, and we'll be able to patch those systems. For custom patching, we'll basically leverage that same feature to enable custom patching, where you'll provide the proper switches and everything needed to deploy that patch, and that'll come in a later phase of that feature.
Okay, and then back to Samed, a lot of questions around mobile assets. So mobile device inventory, is that agent-based or agentless? How do you bring in mobiles and tablets? When is that coming in those aspects?
Yeah, I think part of this, Chris, is probably something you can answer on the agent also. But for me, the way I look at that is why the interest in mobile right now is because more and more businesses are leveraging handheld devices to conduct actual business, right? So it's gone from just BYOD to check email to enterprises are acquiring a large number of handheld devices. If you go to a branch office, you go to stores in the mall, they or restaurants, they're using handheld devices to do a lot of the activity. And so there is definitely the same kind of rigorous process of asset inventory discovery, assessment of vulnerabilities, prioritization and patching needs to be applicable to mobile devices as well. And so the way we are discovering mobile devices, of course, is can't really leverage active scanner as much to do mobile device discovery, but the free passive scanning that is included as part of the VMDR solution for inventory for passive devices of unknown devices will detect mobile devices so you know what they are. And then if you want a more detailed inventory, that's when the secure enterprise mobility agent that we are including, which is a cloud agent for Android iOS devices, which is another free agent for inventory that's included as part of VMDR, that will get more in-depth capabilities to see what's installed, what apps are installed, are the approved apps installed, what's is encryption enabled, what's the pin size and all of that. And then a little bit later this year, there will be more capabilities around assessment of vulnerabilities and configuration assessment and remediation actions that we will provide around mobile devices as well.
And you mentioned the Qualys passive sensor capability to detect mobile devices on the network. So I'm scrolling down to the questions that people asked about the passive sensor since you announced it and talked about that during the demo. What technology are you using to detect new assets in the network? How do you passively scan? Not really a scan, right? How does the passive sensor work to identify new hosts in the network, and how can they be brought into VMDR? So more questions around our passive sensor capabilities, part of VMDR.
Yeah, we can debate on that for hours, whether it's a scan or not. But whatever you call it, it's not the same way that we scan with an active scanner, right? With the virtual scanners that we've had and the physical scanners where the device is going out and probing everything that's on the network. The downside of that is if you do a periodic scan, anything that comes on the network between the two scans will not be detected. So that's why we came up with a new technology, which is basically sniffing packets on the network. So uh, it's a device that you can put on the mirror port of a router or a switch or whatever it is, and then you take the traffic we analyze the traffic on the virtual machine that's installed in the network, and then use that to discover devices that are communicating. So that way, even if a device comes up and communicates even for 5 seconds, we will capture it. No matter what, there will be a record of that device. And if that device is already known to Qualys because of agent or scanning, then that will be a managed device. And anything else that is unknown, we will basically tag that as an unmanaged device. We will do our normalization categorization to try to figure out what device it is, if it's an Xbox or if it's a Chromecast, or if it's an IoT device, or if it's just a Windows machine, whatever it is. And then from there on, you can basically use other methods in Qualys to do some in-depth analysis if needed as well.
And just maybe one more question for you before we go back to Jimmy. There's a lot of questions about the agent, of course, because that came up yesterday and days before. But as we talk about the agent in VMDR, we also had another big announcement from Qualys, which is the remote endpoint protection. So there has been a few questions on how does remote endpoint protection differ from VMDR? Do they can be used together? What really are those two things, and how is the agent used for those two things?
Yeah, it's the patching service really came about because of what is happening right now with COVID-19, unfortunately, and almost everybody's working from home. So the threat vector of what security people are looking for has suddenly shifted to home networks and machines that are at home, and there is almost no other solution than to use some sort of a cloud-based solution, because these devices are now all over the world individually, and they don't have the protection of your regular firewall and all of that you had within the network, or the monitoring that you had in the network. And so of course the Qualys technology is very well suited for being able to provide that quick ability to assess the devices, and then also be able to quickly um, remediate the patches that are required by those devices directly going to the cloud, and getting that information in terms of what needs to be patched, and then pulling the patch directly from the vendors. So that is what our customers were really struggling with as soon as the shift to work from home happened, and they came to us. And fortunately, because of our architecture, we were able to very quickly spin up a service that leverages the same components that VMDR provides, in terms of being able to detect assets, do inventory, uh, to find the vulnerabilities, and also deploy the patches. And we give it for 60 days as a free service. And now we are also adding malware detection capabilities to that same agent, so that our existing customers can really address the challenge pretty quickly. And then, of course, all of those accounts will also get upgraded to VMDR, and then VMDR will uh, if customers choose to do VMDR, full VMDR, then they will also be able to do prioritization and additional things on that free service that currently are not part of the free service, which is prioritization and the things around that, which will be rolling out pretty soon here.
So just to clarify, those customers and companies that have signed up for the remote endpoint protection capability at Qualys, as they move into VMDR, then they get all the additional capabilities around VMDR, correct?
Yes, the free service already includes a bunch of capabilities, and they will, of course, be moved to the VMDR experience UI. And then if those customers want the full prioritization and all of that, then they will have to move to VMDR. Now, patching is already included as part of the 60-day free service. So that will be an additional component that's also included there.
And now back to Jimmy, since I know he's dying to answer a lot more of these patch management questions, and really just talk about the end user experience to that, because as Samed mentioned around the remote endpoint protection, the capabilities really focused on work from home because of all the COVID-19 issues. Maybe two questions, little technical and drill down in terms of end user experience for patch management. Is there a way to notify the end user that patching is happening, or allow them to stop or defer? Another question is, how do you manage reboots when the user is actively using the endpoint itself?
Yeah, so we've introduced a UI to the Cloud Agent for the purpose of patching, and that's what it's designed for, is to be able to notify the user and give a prompt to say, hey, we need to patch your system. And of course, this is optional. You don't have to use these features, but you can give them the option to start patching now or defer the patching till later. It's configurable how many times you want to prompt them, how long you want to wait between prompts. We also have a patch in progress message. We have a deployment complete message. We also handle reboot requests the same way. So the user can get a prompt to say, patching is completed. We need to reboot your system. They can defer that up to whatever limit you want to set for however long you want to set. And we also do a countdown. So if you want to force them to reboot, you can enable a countdown where we will pop up a box and count down a timer and then reboot at the end of that timer. If you want to completely suppress reboots, if you have this is mainly targeted for servers, you typically wouldn't want to do this for workstations, but if you have an alternate method where you want to handle the reboot yourselves, you can also suppress the reboot and we won't handle the reboot at all.
And all those capabilities we have documented. We have videos on that. I was going to say, Jimmy, that where can you read more about patch management, but I got caught. I got caught by Sumedh, when he said, where can you read more about VMDR? And it's not. It's really for someone to actually go in and do a trial of VMDR. Can you imagine that we did round 2 of our Q&A for VMDR Live? We went through a lot of questions. There's still a few more. We will follow up with those customers that have asked those. In the last few minutes, I'll give it to you, Sumedh, for closing remarks on VMDR Live in our live Q&A.
Yeah, I think I already spoke quite a bit about that all day long. So I think as we talked about earlier, it's there's no magic easy solution for being able to do all these things in one single workflow, one single interface. But that is what is the need of the hour right now, and that's what we have tried to do, is really pull together many different components of your vulnerability cycle and put them together. And so this is our first version. There will be a lot of interesting capabilities, additional attack surface vectors that will be flowing out pretty soon as well. So we would be very happy to get feedback from customers. And I think one of the things I was thinking of is if we can set up some sort of a community page or something which will allow customers to give us feedback specifically on additional attack surface options that we can provide, then we can work on building those in for the upcoming versions. And we're going to focus on kind of having a monthly release with some features coming out almost every month now for the next few months for sure. So please, give it a try, give us feedback, see what we can do to improve, and stay tuned for a lot more additional capabilities that will be included as part of VMDR. We're quite excited about it.
Great. Thank you very much for those closing remarks. And with that, we'll end our round 2 of our live Q&A for VMDR Live. Once again, please go to qualys.com/VMDR and sign up for a trial of VMDR. And stay healthy and stay safe, and we'll talk to you soon.